Parents, is this making your job harder?
You know, I could probably write a book about times I've made my job harder by just doing silly things that get in my own way. When's the time you've done that?
I do that on the daily. Yes, it's constant. I am still learning.
No, I think we
I am
always
still
are.
learning.
This is one of those things that we are constantly learning about. We realize something, oh my gosh, I'm actually making my job harder by doing this. And we're
Yes.
already,
And we talk about parenting being the hardest job,
yes.
and there not being a close second. So now I'm intrigued about what this is, although I'm not that intrigued because I know what this is, because we opened and addressed this thing in the previous episodes. A music lyric comes to mind. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Sing it.
Because I used to use this at times. I think I've fully confessed and reformed myself.
You're doing better than I am. The reformation process for this is tough, because this is something that's rooted in our collective communication style, especially just American culture. We kind of default to this as a way of communicating, and we even elevate it. Like, we put it on a pedestal as like this. It's somehow a higher form of communication if we can use this well.
So we're 2 minutes into this. Are you going to say the word? I don't want to say it because I'm trying to eliminate it from my life. And so I'm waiting for you to say it. Then I'm going to feel better if you say it instead of me saying it.
We're playing cat and mouse with this. This was actually a bet we made before the episode of who could actually say the word sarcasm first.
There you go.
And I just lost on purpose. So if you had Nate in over 2 minutes, then you win.
Yeah.
Send us an email at createtransformbecome@gmail.com and let us know if you had Nate on the over 2 minutes.
So I think what we're going to do, Nate, is we're going to use your expertise.
Well, I want to go after this. Like, this is a great topic, and I love this one. This one's kind of personal for me, more from the standpoint of I've done this wrong for so long, and I really feel like this is a way better way.
Again, well, I think, Nate, that we are definitely going to get to how passionate you are in opposition to using sarcasm, because I'm going to lead you through 10 reasons why you should not use sarcasm.
I like the sound of this path.
And I like it too, because you love to be thrown in the hot seat and on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always interested in seeing what you come up with. So one of the things I know when I'm working with business owners, we always talk about the know, like, and trust. You've got to create. They've got to know you. They've got to like you. They've got to trust you.
Yes, sir.
And when you're talking about parents and communicating and building a relationship with their teen athlete and performer, trust is a huge thing. So how does sarcasm undermine trust?
Inherently, it's a say one thing and mean something else, which sets up for failure right there. And like we talked about in the previous episode, this is the riskiest form of communication. And so the more important the relationship and the more important the person and the more important the situation, the less you should look to use sarcasm, because of this very thing that undermines the trust that we have. Because just by nature of sarcasm, it's you're saying one thing, but you're kind of implying something different, which sets it up for, I don't know if I can take this person seriously. And if I don't know I can take you seriously, that sets us up for having some mistrust. Right. It creates confusion, and it eats away at that trust.
And it could be that the intention is not to demean the person, but the attempt at humor falls flat when you're going with sarcasm.
And even if you don't attempt to demean somebody, if there's a shred of doubt in their mind, especially when you're working with kids, like as a coach, I know I screwed this up. As a dad, I know I've messed this up. If I in that important position use sarcasm and create even a little bit of confusion, or even open the window to a little bit, is he really serious? Then I've created a problem.
Right. I can hear my wonderful wife saying, sarcasm is wit turned sour.
Ooh, that's a great
Yeah.
quote. What
Okay.
turns sour?
Number 2, Coach Crandall.
Yes, sir.
Sarcasm damages self-esteem.
Yeah, this one is really tough, and when we use sarcasm, it hits somebody at the heart. And when you're in that parent, teen, or coach role, you can't be running the risk of damaging their self-esteem with what you're saying. And
Because
so if you're
these kids are, even the kids that you think are the most confident, if you meet privately with them and they speak in candor, they will be telling you that they lack confidence in certain things. So they're pretty vulnerable.
Yeah. And if I've learned anything in the last 20 years of coaching, it's you have to assume that these kids need to hear more validation than sarcasm. Even if they're looking like they're taking it well, it just creates a really bad setup where at any given moment you say one thing and it just all falls apart. It's just it eats at their self-esteem, and they're really tough. They put on a really good show that it doesn't bother them, but it's a risk that I'm not willing to take.
Love it. Okay, number 3, creating emotional distance, or maybe another way to say this is widening the gap of
Yeah.
connection.
Well, I don't know if you've seen Inside Out too, but when sarcasm is introduced in Riley's mind, it creates that chasm. Like just like you said there, it's a gap. And the more it's used, the wider that gap can get. And that's exactly what it's talking about here. It creates that emotional separation. They don't know if they can trust you. And so they're not going to invest as much emotionally. They keep themselves at an emotionally safe distance, but that creates the distance. They're doing what they can so they can maintain some kind of emotional safety. But
Which in
sarcasm
the
is the wedge.
Yeah, which in the end, you're alienating them.
Good word. Because that's what it does. It creates that emotional distance.
Okay, speaking of confusion, we all know that we love it when people get passive aggressive with us. And I'm trying to think of examples of sarcasm, and this would be a common way to deliver it is it
Mm-hmm.
often comes in the form of passive aggressive communication. Why is that so harmful?
Well, you think about when you're out for a drive and somebody cuts you off. Well, that was a smart move. And I'm saying that in my car, and it doesn't impact them directly. But if that's how I communicate, and then my kid does something, and I rip off something like that, that's a very passive aggressive form of communication. The more I use it, the more like yeah. If we use it to like try to deal with our frustration, it's not a great way of doing it. Sometimes people will do that. They'll passively aggressively say something to try to deal with their frustration, but it just creates more of the things that we were talking about before, the emotional distance, damaging the self-esteem. And if you're being passive aggressive, it invites the other person to be passive aggressive. And we all know what having passive aggressive teens feels like. As a parent, it's like, yeah, it's not fun.
Not fun at all. Okay, number 5. I'm thinking of a Phil Collins Genesis lyric, a great
I
song,
love your lyrics.
and it must be a misunderstanding.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's okay.
I don't
I
know
mean,
that song.
it's kind of a cool song. I might listen to it on the way home. You So how does sarcasm lead to, you could say, misunderstanding or miscommunication? I think this is going back into the confusion.
Leads to both
World.
because and communication's hard enough. We started with that question. Are you making your job harder? And this is sarcasm does it. And this is why it leads to the miscommunication. I don't know if I can take you seriously. And so, I communicate sarcastically with you. And then the next thing we know, you're ignoring some of the things I'm saying because you're assuming that I'm being sarcastic.
You brought in one of my favorite words, the
Nah,
assume. It
this is
was,
where you need the whiteboard and you write
you
up the
need the
word
whiteboard,
assume.
and it was so enjoyable that I had multiple teachers and coaches. You might get fired nowadays if you wrote this on the board and divided the word up into the
The
first
first
three
three letters.
letters, then the fourth letter, and then the fifth and sixth letter.
Mm-hmm. Because that's what it
That's
does.
it makes that out of both of us.
Yeah. But if it ever comes in, like if I'm sarcastic enough where people just assume that I'm being sarcastic, but I wasn't being sarcastic, now we have a miscommunication.
Hmm.
And it's communication is, we all know this. We've all been in relationships longer than 15 minutes, and we know that communication, staying on the same page, is really hard. Throw in sarcasm, and it gets way harder. Makes it much harder to communicate clearly.
This is really starting to make me anxious and stressing me out, Nate,
Yep.
as I continue to work to eliminate this from my life while still trying to be witty, still trying to inject healthy humor. But that takes us to number 6, which is how does sarcasm actually raise stress, and not the good kind of stress,
Yeah.
but stress that leads to anxiety.
If a person's hearing those comments, it forces them to try to figure it out, and it can lead to a lot of overthinking, which then turns into more stress and anxiety. It activates that negative spiral that we get stuck in when we overthink things, and the more we overthink things, the more stress and anxiety go up. We start worrying about, well, what does this person think about me? I want them to say something really good about me, but they're not. But then they say something and it sounds like it might be something good, but maybe they don't really mean it. And yeah, it's just that
Right.
overthinking generates a lot of internal stress and a lot of anxiety and worry about where the relationship's at, what somebody's really thinking about me.
Yeah, I can see how, especially if you turn the sarcasm dial up to 10, then this is where you're getting into belittling, humiliation, and now the player, the teen, they're very confused
Mm-hmm.
about, well, wait, is what do they feel about my value? Or they might be evaluating their performance and think, well, wait, was my performance good or bad? I can't really tell.
One of the things that coaches get accused a lot of is playing mind games with their players. Like I've heard that a
Mm,
lot. So the coach is just playing mind games with them. And often it's not the coach intentionally playing mind games, but it's this poor use of communication, and things like sarcasm are really high on that list. And then that's what generates that feeling of, well, they're playing mind games, and nobody likes feeling like somebody's messing around in their head. So
I
that
just
definitely ups the stress and anxiety.
Yeah, I just thought of something, Nate, because we're talking about how hard parenting is. Well, coaching from a sport perspective, or I'm even thinking of a drama teacher, and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to, you're trying to get your kids ready for the school play or the musical performance or whatever. It's already hard. So why, as coaches, why are we making it harder by dialing up the confusion by using sarcasm? I need to pull a full Uncle Rico and go back in time, because I don't think this was a constant thing, but I think there were times definitely when I did this, and it would be interesting to see how much better I could be I've got to quit thinking like this. I might be crazy enough to jump back into coaching.
Well, after talking to
Like,
Chad, it's
like
like,
when we were talking to Chad Sims on the parent thing, wanting to go back and try his method. Let's don't get too crazy. Let's don't, you know. Okay, let's jump to number 7, Mr.
cool.
Crandall. How does sarcasm encourage or create a negativity culture?
It's an inherently negative form of communication. It invites more cutting remarks. It invites people to, start communicating in that way. And the more people do it, eventually somebody's going to get their feelings hurt. Eventually miscommunication is going to happen. It's like it encourages a negative culture. A positive culture has straightforward communication. People know where they stand. They know what their role is. That's true in a home. That's true on any team, on any performing group that you're a part of. You can't have those holes in communication that are created by sarcasm. And so it just fosters a negative culture because nobody knows when anybody can really count on, well, did they mean that? Is that what we're really supposed to do? Am I really doing good on this, or do I need to be better at this? And that's a bad culture to be around.
Right. Toxicity, cynicism.
Yeah. Stifles communication too. If I'm sarcastic with my players, if I'm sarcastic with my kids, they're less likely to approach me for help or for a conversation about anything.
Right.
And they definitely don't want to be vulnerable because that's usually what we go to with sarcasm is we'll pick something that somebody has as a vulnerable or a vulnerability. And that's where we direct our sarcasm.
Very well said. Number 8, how does sarcasm reduce motivation in our teen athletes and performers?
Motivation sparked by having high ambition and believing that you can get it. Like that's the core of getting motivation started. And so if we have sarcastic communication that's going on, it can eat away at somebody's belief that they can do something, which lowers motivation. And it can also decrease their ambition because they're unsure if they can even accomplish the step that's right here in front of them, let alone some ambitious goal in the future. So their motivation takes a big hit because their ambition goes down and their confidence goes down.
This is making me want to not use sarcasm.
Good.
Yeah.
And I know there's people that defend sarcasm and love sarcasm, and they pride themselves on doing it. And I would encourage them to go back and listen to our previous episode where we talk about clever wit, because clever wit is good and it's fun, and we like to communicate with people like that. But when you asked a question earlier about where does it come from, why do we use it? I think many times as a parent and as a coach, I've gone to sarcasm because I'm frustrated. Like I'm really frustrated with something, but I'm frustrated with somebody that I love. And instead of dealing with the issue head on and having a mature conversation about it, I default to sarcasm as a way of of releasing some of my frustration for that person that I love, but doing it in what makes me feel like it's a less toxic way.
Yeah. And I think it's especially worse for a coach or a parent because we're generally in an authority position.
The power dynamic comes into play.
We are exercising power over them in a way that we really should not.
Yeah.
Nate, okay, moving to number 9. One of our favorite slogans that comes from, I believe it comes from Brendan Burchard, is people support what they create.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's actually his line, is it? I can't remember. I know
no,
I've heard him say
that's very much what it is.
Okay, so people support what they create. So how can sarcasm actually prevent or stifle creativity and risk taking?
Well, we love to be creative. That's one of our drives that we have is we want to express ourselves in ways. That's why we dress the way we do. It's why we play the games and the sports, and why we do, just so many of the things we do. We want to be unique and we want to be individual. But if I'm trying to stretch my limits, if I'm trying to try out some new things and do some creative things, but I'm getting sarcasm, I'm going to be a lot less likely to put myself out there because I don't know if I'm getting a sincere compliment, or I don't know if that criticism was
Mm.
positive criticism, or I can't trust it. And if I can't feel safe in a relationship, if I can't feel safe in that conversation, then that's going to stuff my creativity. It's going to limit my willingness to go out and take some risks.
Mm. To me, that's very frightening
Mm-hmm.
because think of all of the good that you could be preventing
Ooh, ooh,
by
let that sink in.
mm. Because if they fail to take the leap, they probably will fail to take the leap again and again and again. And it may be quite some time before they overcome that. That's awful.
The pressure on our teens now is higher than it's been. Like social media, everything gets put on display. It's all there fast. If they fail, they're really feeling it. It's like my friends are going to know right away. Everybody knows right away. It's going to be all over
Mm.
social media. That's a lot of pressure. And so when we hit it with sarcasm on top of the pressure they're all already experiencing, it really stuffs their willingness to take a risk.
Right. Okay. Number 10, we touched on this
Yeah.
just a couple of minutes ago, but how does sarcasm reinforce or create a power imbalance between parent and teen?
Well, a lot of times, and this is the more nefarious side of sarcasm. I don't think people inadvertently do this. Well, they might, depend. And this is why the importance scale matters. The more important the situation, the more important the person, the
Mm.
less you should use sarcasm. Because if I'm talking to my kids, there's a power imbalance. If I'm coaching players, there's a power imbalance, and so I should be incredibly judicious if I use sarcasm at all, because it reinforces that power. I can get away with saying it because I have the power in this situation. I'm the parent, I'm the coach. I can say these sarcastic comments and it's okay. And it really it makes them feel even smaller when you do it in those situations.
Yeah, I think it makes it more unlikely that they will come to you to confide something very important with you
Or even seek
because
out your help.
they're probably not going to ask the really critical, important question because they're going to feel so vulnerable and they know that, ooh, I might just be, I might be belittled here or ridiculed here.
Yeah, this is a tough reality to step in, and like I understand fully that this is a very challenging topic for people because a lot of us really rely on sarcasm in our relationships.
So what would you say to the parent who has used it, who is using it? How can they measure progress? What's the next step for them to start eliminating sarcasm from their connections and conversations?
Step one is increase awareness. How much are you using it? How is it impacting your kids? And that can be the second part of that, how it's impacting your kids can be a really tough one to take a look at. But if you can step back from the situation, and this is where, inviting your spouse to help you increase your awareness, say, when I'm sarcastic with the kids, how do you think they take it?
Mm.
And really being open to getting an honest answer. And, your spouse might be like, you kind of cross some lines. You're making it hard for them. That's the first step. And unfortunately, that's going to hurt a little bit. But that hurt is a good thing if it's driving
Mm.
you to improve that. The next step would be start having an honest conversation with your kids about, what, I feel really bad that I talked to you that way.
Mm.
Maybe there's a better way for us to communicate. I'm going to try to use sarcasm less. And thank you for being patient with me as I try to do this, but you're so important to me that I want to make sure that there's no confusion about how I feel about you and how proud I am of you. And kids are insanely forgiving. They're so good with this. And I've had experience with these conversations with my own kids and also with kids that I coach. And it can be really building for the relationship if they know you're coming from a place of sincerity and of love and you're trying to be better. And if you hit them with something sarcastic, just call it out, identify it, and then say, I'm going to keep working to be better. I'm sorry about that.
I love
That's
it.
where I would start.
I love it. An honest conversation with your spouse, and then an honest conversation with your teen.
Self-evaluation, and then that honest conversation with somebody that has a lot of knowledge about how you interact with them, that's seen you do it.
Okay, you have 10 seconds, Nate, for a final exclamation point.
Parents, we are so proud of you for tackling this tough topic, because I promise you, if you can get this right, if you can get sincere, open, honest conversations going with your kids, it's going to bless and benefit both of your lives and the relationship in some significant ways. Go get them.
On behalf of Steve Galley, I'm Nate Crandall, and we thank you, our loyal listeners, for tuning into this episode. If you love what you're learning from the Stop Parenting and Start Coaching podcast, we would appreciate it very much if you would leave us a 5-star review and some glowing comments. We also encourage you to share this episode with your friends and family who are parents of athletes and performers. And if you want to explore further and see what Steve and I are creating to help thousands of parents, athletes, and performers, please visit our company's website at createtransformbecome.com. That's createtransformbecome, all one word, .com. There you'll find a growing number of resources to help you elevate your performance. Thank you again for your support, and we encourage you to create a magical relationship with your athlete and performer.